When the soldier signed the papers, no one congratulated him. The woman at the county office slid the documents across the desk without looking up. The man waiting behind him shifted his weight, impatient. Outside, the wind scraped dust across the parking lot, dry and relentless like it had been for decades. Nothing about the moment felt ceremonial, and that was exactly how he wanted it. The ranch sat far beyond where the paved road ended. No neighbors, no cell signal, just open land stretching toward a horizon that never seemed to get closer, no matter how long you drove. Most people saw emptiness. He saw clarity. He had spent a lifetime being told where to stand, when to move, what to defend. Now, for the first time, the boundaries were his to define. The house itself was modest, weathered wood, a low roofline, a porch that creaked under a man's weight. It wasn't new, it wasn't comfortable, but it stood firm against the wind, and that mattered more than appearances. The barn leaned slightly to the east. The fencing was old, patched in places, missing in others. Cattle grazed slowly, unaware of anything beyond grass and routine. The land had a reputation. Locals said it was too far out, too quiet, too much trouble for what it was worth. Some claimed previous owners never stayed long. Others just shook their heads and changed the subject. No one gave details. Men who had lived their whole lives in the area suddenly remembered errands when the ranch came up in conversation. That kind of silence was familiar to him. In his first weeks there, he kept to himself. He repaired fence posts, reinforced gates, walked the perimeter every morning and every evening, boots pressing the same lines into the dirt. He didn't rush. He didn't cut corners. He learned the land the way a man learns another person, by watching, listening, noticing what didn't belong. At night, the wind carried sounds farther than it should have. Metal tapping softly, distant engines. Once or twice the cattle stirred for no obvious reason, heads lifting in unison, as if reacting to something beyond sight. He wrote nothing down. He didn't need to. The first sign came quietly, a gate left open that he knew he had closed. Tire tracks where there hadn't been any the day before. Fence wire loosened, not broken. Tested. Someone curious, someone confident enough to believe distance meant absence. Out here, most men assumed no one was watching. They were wrong. He fixed the fence without comment, reset the gate, erased the tracks as best he could. If anyone was observing from a distance, they would have seen nothing unusual. Just an old soldier settling into retirement, minding his ranch. But that night, standing on the porch, he looked out across the land and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not fear. Readiness. And somewhere beyond the reach of the porch light, someone else had crossed a line they didn't realize existed. The ranch taught him its rules the same way the army had, through repetition, through consequence, through small details that mattered more than big speeches. He woke before dawn out of habit, not because he needed to. The air was cold enough to sting the inside of his nose. The sky was a pale gray sheet, the stars fading one by one as if someone were turning them off. He brewed coffee strong, drank it without sitting, and stepped outside with the same quiet efficiency he'd carried for most of his life. The porch boards groaned under his boots. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote yipped and got answered from farther out. The cattle were still, dark shapes in the pasture, their breath faint white puffs in the air. He walked the perimeter, not because he was paranoid, because the land deserved attention, because fences were promises, because boundaries were only real if a man treated them like they were. The first mile was clean. Old fence posts, some replaced, some still original, wire pulled tight enough to do its job. The gate on the north side was latched, exactly as he'd left it. The cattle moved slowly, heads down, uninterested. Then he saw it. A fresh cut in the dirt near the dry creek bed. 2 sets of tire tracks, one narrow, one wider, curving off the county dirt road, passing through a low spot where the fence line dipped. The wire wasn't broken. It had been lifted carefully, just enough to slide under. Someone had been there in the night. He crouched, ran 2 fingers along the impression, and smelled the soil the way old ranchers did. Dry, recent. dust still settling. He didn't need a clock to tell him it happened in the last few hours. He stood and scanned the horizon. Nothing moved but grass and wind. The land was flat enough that a man could see far, but it had its folds. Low rises, shallow gullies, places a vehicle could hide for a minute before reappearing. He followed the tracks, slow. Half a mile in, the wide tire pattern veered toward the cattle. The narrow one continued toward the back property line, where the ranch bordered a stretch of scrub and rock that locals used as a shortcut. That told him something. 2 vehicles, 2 roles, one to distract, one to do the real work. He stopped near the cattle, careful not to spook them. Their ears were up now, eyes watching him, not afraid, alert. He took a few steps, and the herd shifted as one, subtle, like men in a room changing posture when someone new walks in. He found the second sign near the water trough. A bolt on the trough's support had been loosened, not removed, not enough to collapse it, just enough to weaken it. A test, a message. Someone who understood that damage didn't need to be dramatic to matter. Someone who wanted him to notice. He tightened it, stood, and looked across the pasture. That's when he saw the calf. It wasn't dead. Not yet. But it was down, breathing hard, legs scrambling uselessly in the dust. A shallow length of wire, thin, almost invisible, was twisted around its front legs like a trap. The calf bleated, panicked, and the sound carried across the open land in a way that made it feel louder than it should have. He moved quickly, knee down, calm hands, firm grip. The calf kicked once, wild, and his wrist took the impact without flinching. He spoke softly, not words meant to comfort but sounds meant to steady. He untwisted the wire, checked the calf for bleeding, and freed it. The animal scrambled up and stumbled toward the herd, favoring one leg. The wire was not ranch wire. It was clean, new, cut with intention. He coiled it and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Not because he needed proof, because he wanted to understand the mind behind it. Back at the house, he didn't call anyone. That wasn't how he operated. Calling people turned quiet problems into public problems. Public problems attracted attention. Attention attracted opinions. Opinions brought trouble. He'd spent too long in systems that moved slow and talked too much. He preferred simple. He preferred clarity. He repaired the section of fence where the wire had been lifted. He didn't add flashy signs or threats. He reinforced the posts, tightened tension, made the entry point harder to repeat without effort. Then, while the morning sun crawled higher, he went into the barn. Inside, the air smelled of hay, old wood, and oil. Tools hung neatly where he'd placed them. Not many possessions, not many comforts, just what mattered. He opened a metal cabinet and removed a small notebook. Not a diary, a log. He wrote 3 lines. 2 vehicles. Fence lifted at creek dip. Wire trap on calf. He stared at the words a moment longer than necessary, then closed the notebook and returned it to the cabinet. A man could learn everything he needed from 3 lines if he knew how to read them. That afternoon, he drove into town. The feed store was a low building with faded signage and a porch lined with bags of seed and salt blocks. The bell above the door rang when he stepped in. The man behind the counter, gray beard, sun-worn skin, looked up and paused just long enough to register him. "New owner," the man said. Not a question. The soldier nodded. "You picked a piece of land people don't pick," the man added, eyes narrowing slightly as if assessing whether the soldier understood the weight of that statement. "I wanted quiet," the soldier said. The man snorted, half amused, half something else. "Quiet's different from empty." The soldier didn't respond. He didn't offer his history. Men like him learned early that too much explanation gave other people leverage. He paid for salt blocks and fencing staples. As the clerk loaded the receipt into the register, the soldier said casually, "Any reason folks avoid that ranch?" The man's hands paused. "Not much. Just enough." He glanced toward the back of the store, where a young employee pretended not to listen. Then he leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Cattle go missing out there," he said. "Not all at once. Not enough for the law to care. Just enough to make a man tired." The soldier held his expression steady. "Rustlers." The clerk shrugged like the word itself was dangerous. Some say it's worse." "What's worse than rustlers?" the soldier asked. The clerk hesitated. Then, like a man choosing his words carefully, he said, "Rustlers want your cattle. The other kind want your land." The soldier nodded once as if that confirmed something he'd already suspected. As he turned to leave, the clerk added, "If you're smart, you'll keep your head down." The soldier stopped at the door and looked back. "I didn't buy it to keep my head down," he said quietly. The drive home felt longer. The sky had turned the color of bruised steel. Wind pushed against his truck, rocking it slightly. The ranch appeared in the distance like a solitary ship on an ocean of dirt and grass. He turned off the engine and sat in silence for a moment, listening. No coyotes now, no birds, just wind. He stepped out and saw something hanging on the fence near the gate. A strip of red cloth. Bright. Clean. Tied in a tight knot. Deliberate. Not ranch material. Not something that blew in by accident. A marker, a warning, or an invitation. He walked up slowly, untied it with 2 fingers, and held it in his hand. The cloth smelled faintly of gasoline and something chemical underneath, like shop solvent. He stared down the fence line, toward the creek dip where the wire had been lifted that morning. And that's when he heard it. A distant engine. Not on the county road. On his land. Moving slow, confident, like whoever drove it believed the ranch was already theirs. The soldier didn't run. He didn't shout. He simply turned, walked to the porch, and stepped into the shadow of the house where the light wouldn't silhouette him. He waited, because whoever was coming wanted a reaction. And the first rule of dealing with men who test boundaries is simple. Don't give them what they came for. The engine sound cut off before it reached the house. That told him more than if it had roared straight in. Whoever was driving knew the land well enough to stop out of sight, knew where the dips were, where sound carried, where it didn't. That kind of familiarity didn't come from a single visit. The soldier stayed where he was, just inside the shadow cast by the porch roof. From there he could see the yard, the gate, the long stretch of fence that curved toward the creek bed. He kept his breathing slow, shallow, the way he'd learned long before retirement had ever been a word associated with him. Minutes passed, then footsteps, not rushed, not careless. Gravel crunched lightly, spaced evenly. 1 man, maybe 2. He listened for the second set and didn't hear it, which meant either there was only 1, or the other was smart enough to move when the wind picked up. The gate creaked. A hand-tested creak, someone easing it open just enough to slide through without noise. The cattle shifted again in the pasture, heads lifting. Animals knew things before men did. A figure emerged near the fence line. The man wore a jacket too light for the evening chill and boots that had never stepped in honest mud. He moved like someone who believed he belonged wherever he stood. In one hand, he held a flashlight but didn't turn it on. In the other, something long and metal that caught a dull reflection of moonlight. Bolt cutters. The soldier didn't move. The man walked the fence, slow and deliberate, stopping where the red cloth had been tied earlier. He frowned when he noticed it was gone. That was the first crack in his confidence. He turned, scanning the darkness. "Old man," he called, voice carrying just enough to test the air. "We don't want trouble." The soldier almost smiled. Men who announced they didn't want trouble usually wanted something worse. The man continued, louder now. "This land's got history. You don't want to get mixed up in it." Still, the soldier didn't answer. Silence was its own language. One he spoke fluently. The man shifted his weight, uncomfortable. He raised the flashlight and swept it across the yard, over the porch, across the windows. The beam passed inches from where the soldier stood and moved on. Too fast. Too sloppy. The soldier noted it. The man stepped closer to the gate, bolt cutters hanging loose now, no longer hidden. He was sending a message, showing intent, seeing what reaction it would provoke. "You leave the fence open tonight," the man said, trying a different tone, almost friendly. "No one gets hurt. We'll take what we need and be gone." There it was. Confirmation. The soldier stepped forward just enough for his outline to detach from the darkness. The man startled. Not much, but enough. "I don't leave my fences open," the soldier said. His voice was calm, flat, the kind that didn't rise or fall because it didn't need to. The man recovered quickly, masking the flinch with a grin. "Didn't hear you walk up." "I wasn't walking," the soldier said. That unsettled him again. The flashlight dipped slightly. The man took a step back, then stopped himself, pride wrestling with instinct. "Look," he said, raising one hand. "This doesn't have to be a problem. You're new. You don't know how things work out here." The soldier studied him in the half-light. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. No calluses worth mentioning. No scars where they counted. Not the leader. Just the one sent to talk. "You tested my fence this morning," the soldier said. "You trapped a calf." The man's jaw tightened. "Animals wander. Accidents happen." "That wire was cut," the soldier replied. "You don't cut wire by accident." The silence that followed was heavier. Behind the man, the wind shifted, and with it came the faint sound of another engine, farther out. Waiting. Backup. The soldier nodded once as if filing the detail away. "You don't belong out here," the man said, voice harder now. "You don't understand what you bought." "I understand boundaries," the soldier said. "You crossed one." The man laughed, but it came out thin. "You think you're going to scare us off with words?" "No," the soldier said. "I think you're going to scare yourselves." The man's smile vanished. For a moment, it looked like he might raise the bolt cutters, might test how far this would go. The soldier adjusted his stance slightly, barely noticeable, but it shifted his weight forward. Grounded, ready. The man noticed. That was the moment everything changed. He lowered the cutters and took another step back. "This isn't over," he said. "You can't watch the land all the time." The soldier didn't argue. Men like this needed the last word. They needed to feel like they were leaving by choice. The man turned and walked back toward the fence. He didn't rush, but he didn't linger either. When he reached the gate, he paused. "Next time," he said without looking back, "you won't get a warning." The soldier watched him disappear into the darkness, listened to the engine start, listened to it idle, then fade. Only when the sound was gone did he move. He walked the fence line again, slower this time. Not to repair, everything was intact, but to observe, to confirm. At the creek dip, he knelt and found new footprints layered over the old ones. 2 men this time, one heavier, one lighter. The lighter one favored his right foot slightly. He smiled faintly. Patterns. Back at the barn, he pulled the notebook from the cabinet and added 2 more lines. Spokesman sent alone. Second vehicle waiting beyond fence. He closed the notebook and stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet. This was the stage of the game most men didn't understand. They thought conflict began with confrontation, with shouting, with violence. They were wrong. Conflict began with assessment. And assessment was where he had always excelled. He turned off the barn light and stepped outside. The moon was higher now, casting long shadows across the land. The cattle had settled again, unaware of how close danger had brushed past them. The soldier walked to the fence and ran his hand along the wire. "This is my line," he said softly, to no one. Then he went back inside the house and did something he hadn't done since the day he arrived. He locked the door. Not because he was afraid, but because tonight had confirmed what the clerk in town already knew. The men who came for cattle rarely came only once, and the men who came for land never came empty-handed. From this point on, the ranch wouldn't be testing him. He would be testing it, and whoever failed wouldn't get a second warning. The second test came 3 nights later. Not loud, not dramatic, just confident. The soldier noticed it before he heard it. The cattle shifted again, same as before, but this time they didn't lift their heads all at once. They turned, slowly, toward the south fence, toward the low stretch where the land dipped just enough to hide a truck from the house. That detail mattered. Animals didn't react the same way twice unless something had changed. He set his coffee down untouched and stepped onto the porch. The air carried the faint smell of diesel. Old diesel, the kind used by men who kept engines running longer than they should have. He listened. No engine noise now. Just the wind and the distant rattle of wire. He didn't reach for anything. He didn't turn on a light. He waited. The fence didn't creak this time. Whoever it was had learned. The wire shifted softly, controlled, lifted by hands that knew where the tension points were. No bolt cutters. No tearing. Just patience. The soldier moved off the porch and into the yard, keeping to the shadows cast by the barn. He stayed downwind. He counted steps without looking at the ground. 32 to the old trough. 12 more to the fence line. He stopped. 2 silhouettes moved beyond the wire. One crouched. One standing, watching the road. No flashlights, no voices. They were better than the first man, or at least more careful. The crouching figure reached through the fence and tied something to the wire. The soldier leaned slightly, adjusting his angle. A strip of cloth. Dark this time. Knotted tight. A marker. The crouched man backed away. The standing one gave a short signal, 2 fingers, low, and they moved together, slipping back into the dip, disappearing as cleanly as they'd arrived. The soldier didn't follow. He waited until the cattle settled, until the night felt empty again. Then he walked to the fence. The cloth was heavier than the red one. Oily. Purposeful. He pulled it free and held it up to the moonlight. It wasn't a warning anymore, it was ownership. He returned to the house, retrieved the notebook, and added 1 line. Their mapping. That told him everything he needed to know. Men who wanted cattle came quick and sloppy. Men who wanted land came slow. They tested. They marked. They watched reactions. They waited to see what kind of man they were dealing with. Most landowners failed this stage without ever realizing it. They complained. They threatened. They called the sheriff too early or too late. They showed fear or anger, both equally useful to predators. The soldier did neither. The next morning, he drove out early. Not to town. To the far edge of the property where the fence met scrubland and rock. The place locals avoided because trucks got stuck there and radios lost signal. He parked, stepped out, and walked the boundary on foot. He found fresh boot prints. Different tread than before. Military surplus, but old. Cheap. Bought for durability, not appearance. He knelt and pressed his thumb into the dirt. Still soft. He followed the trail into the scrub, careful not to disturb it. 20 yards in, he found where they'd stopped to observe. Flattened grass, a cigarette butt ground into the dirt crushed flat. He picked it up with 2 fingers. Filter brand told him more than he expected. The kind sold in bulk at discount stations. The kind men bought when they smoked a lot and didn't care about taste. He returned to the truck and drove back without closing the loop. That afternoon he did something deliberate. He left the south gate unlocked. Not open. Unlocked. He wanted to see who noticed. He worked in the barn the rest of the day, repairing a broken hinge, stacking feed, keeping busy. From a distance it would have looked like routine. Like a man settling into ranch life. At dusk a truck passed the county road twice. Once heading east, once heading back west. Too slow both times. The soldier watched from inside the barn, standing behind stacked hay bales, his outline broken. He noted the color. The sound. The way it hesitated near the gate. Night fell. The gate creaked open. 1 man entered alone this time. No crouching, no hesitation. He walked in like he expected the land to step aside for him, like he'd already won something. He carried no tools. That worried the soldier more than if he had. The man walked past the cattle without looking at them. That meant they weren't the target. He headed straight for the barn. The soldier stepped into view. The man froze. They stood there, 30 feet apart, with nothing between them but dirt and quiet. "You left it unlocked," the man said, nodding toward the gate. His voice carried confidence edged with irritation. "That tells me something." "It tells you I noticed," the soldier replied. The man smiled thinly. "It tells me you're tired." "No," the soldier said. "It tells you I'm patient." The man's eyes flicked briefly toward the house, the barn, the fence line. He was counting, measuring, calculating risk. "You don't have enough people to hold this place," the man said. "Not long term." The soldier didn't argue. Men like this spoke in assumptions. Interrupting them only slowed things down. "You sell now," the man continued. "You walk away clean. No trouble. No loss. You hold out. Things get unpredictable." The soldier took one step forward. Just one. "You already crossed the line," he said. "Now you're standing on it." The man's smile vanished. "You don't get to decide that." The soldier held his gaze. "I already did." Silence stretched between them. The cattle shifted again, uneasy. The man exhaled through his nose. "You think this ends well for you?" The soldier answered without raising his voice. "It ends." That was enough. The man took a step back, then another. Not retreating, repositioning, filing information away. "This isn't over," he said. The soldier nodded once. "It never is." The man turned and walked out through the gate, leaving it open behind him. The soldier closed it, locked it. Then he stood there for a long moment, hand resting on the wire. They weren't stealing cattle anymore. They weren't testing fences. They were negotiating. And negotiation meant the quiet phase was almost over. That night, the soldier sat at the kitchen table and opened the notebook one last time. He wrote, "They want the land." Then beneath it, "They've decided I'm the obstacle." He closed the book. Men who reached this stage always made the same mistake. They assumed obstacles could be moved, removed, worn down. They forgot something simple. Some obstacles didn't move. They waited. And the land remembered who stood on it when the line was crossed. The ranch changed after that night. Not in obvious ways. The fences stood. The cattle grazed. The wind still carried dust across the flats like it always had. But the rhythm shifted. The pauses between sounds grew longer. The silences felt intentional, as if someone were holding their breath. The soldier noticed it first thing the next morning. A pickup idled on the county road longer than necessary, just beyond the rise where the fence dipped from view. It didn't turn in. It didn't pass through. It waited. When he stepped onto the porch, the engine shut off and the truck rolled forward, disappearing toward town. He finished his coffee and did not follow. He walked the perimeter instead, slow and thorough. No new cuts. No lifted wire. No cloth markers. Whoever was watching had decided not to touch anything today. That, too, was information. By noon, he had the barn doors open and the radio off. He worked without gloves, letting the wood bite where it needed to. He fixed a latch that didn't need fixing, straightened nails already straight. The work was a cover, not for others, but for himself. It kept his hands busy while his mind sorted the pattern. They had moved from testing to presence. Presence was pressure. Mid-afternoon, a sedan he didn't recognize drove up the long dirt approach and stopped well short of the house. The driver got out and leaned against the hood, arms crossed, waiting to be seen. The soldier stayed inside the barn. Minutes passed. The man eventually walked closer, stopping at the edge of the yard where the grass gave way to packed dirt. He wore clean boots and a jacket too light for ranch work. He didn't look around much. He kept his eyes on the barn. "Mr. Carter?" the man called. The soldier didn't answer. He hadn't given his name to anyone in town. Hearing it spoken here, on his land, tightened something in his chest. The man tried again. "I'm here to talk." The soldier stepped into the light, just enough to be visible. He didn't invite the man closer. "You already did," he said. The man smiled, professional and practiced. "Then let's make it official." "I don't do official," the soldier replied. The man sighed as if disappointed. "You bought a property with complications. I'm here to help you avoid unnecessary ones." "You don't help people you've never met," the soldier said. "You help interests." The smile faltered. Just slightly. The man reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. He held it up without stepping forward. "Offer stands for 48 hours. "I didn't ask for an offer." "You don't have to," the man said. "It exists whether you want it or not." The soldier glanced at the paper and then away. "Take it back." The man lowered the document. "You should read it." "I already know what it says." The man studied him now, reassessing. "This land will change hands," he said quietly. "It always does." The soldier's eyes didn't leave his. "It won't." The silence that followed was longer than before. The man shifted his weight, uncomfortable in a way he hadn't expected to be. "You think standing firm scares people like us?" he asked. "No," the soldier said. "I think you don't like uncertainty." The man's jaw tightened. 48 hours, he repeated, tucking the paper away. "After that, I can't promise how this goes." The soldier watched him return to the sedan and drive off without dusting the road the way most people did. He waited until the sound was gone, then went back to work. That night, the cattle broke routine. Not panicked, just wrong. They drifted toward the north fence at dusk and wouldn't settle. One calf bawled and then went quiet. The wind carried a sound that didn't belong, metal on metal, distant, rhythmic. The soldier didn't turn on the porch light. He walked to the fence with measured steps and listened. Somewhere beyond the property line, something heavy was being unloaded. The sound of chains, a truck idling low. Voices kept deliberately low. He backed away without being seen. Inside the house, he pulled the notebook from its place and flipped to a fresh page. He didn't write. He listened. The sound stopped after 20 minutes. The engine faded. The night returned to its uneasy calm. At dawn, he found the sign. A new fence post had been driven just beyond his boundary line, 5 feet outside the wire. Fresh wood, straight, untouched by weather. A ribbon of bright survey tape fluttered from it, catching the light. It wasn't on his land. It was close enough to matter. The soldier stood there a long time, hands resting on the top wire, eyes fixed on the post. This was different from the cloth, different from the open gate. This was a claim. He turned and walked back to the barn without touching it. Late morning brought the sheriff. The cruiser pulled up slowly, tires crunching in a way meant to announce presence without urgency. The sheriff stepped out alone, hat tipped back, expression cautious. "Morning," he said. "Morning," the soldier replied. The sheriff glanced toward the fence, then back. "Been some calls." "I figured. Folks say there's tension." "There is." The sheriff shifted his stance. "You planning on escalating things?" The soldier met his gaze. "No." "Then help me understand why it feels like you are." The soldier considered his words. "Because someone else already did." The sheriff sighed. "Look, this land's been in dispute before. Quiet disputes. People don't like noise out here." "I don't make noise," the soldier said. "I keep lines." The sheriff nodded slowly. "I'd appreciate it if you'd consider that offer." The soldier didn't respond. The sheriff tipped his hat and returned to the cruiser. "I don't want trouble." "Neither do I," the soldier said. The cruiser left. By afternoon, the ribbon on the new post had been replaced with a painted mark. Bright white, deliberate, fresh. The soldier watched it from the porch, unmoving. At sunset, a second post appeared. Closer. That night, he made a decision. He didn't remove the posts. He didn't cut the tape. He didn't confront anyone. He moved the cattle. He guided them to the far pasture, away from the fence line, away from the road, away from where eyes lingered. He closed gates quietly and left the lights off. From a distance, the land would look empty, unclaimed. When the truck came after midnight, it drove straight through the unlocked gate and stopped near the barn. Men got out, their silhouettes sharp against the sky. They walked the fence and frowned. There were no cattle. They spread out, voices rising despite themselves. One kicked dirt. Another laughed, uneasy. They stayed too long. The soldier watched from the dark, counting steps, memorizing outlines, letting them make the mistake of assuming emptiness meant absence. When they finally left, the gate stayed open. The soldier closed it before dawn. At first light, the white paint on the post was smeared, not erased, touched, marked. The soldier opened the notebook and wrote the last line for the night. They think pressure will move me. He closed it and looked out over the land, now quiet again. Pressure only worked on men who resisted it. He had learned long ago that the stronger position was to let pressure settle, to see where it pooled, where it cracked, and where it revealed who was willing to stand where the line had already been crossed. The ranch was done being tested. What came next would not be loud, but it would be final. The disappearance wasn't announced. It never was. The first sign came from town, not the ranch. The feed store didn't open on time. That alone would have meant nothing to most people. But in places like this, routines mattered. Men who opened stores early did so because they wanted the day to start on their terms. When the lights stayed off past sunrise, people noticed. By mid-morning, a rumor had started moving. Not loud, not fast, just persistent. Someone hadn't come home. The soldier heard it from the radio in the barn. Not as a headline, not even as news. Just a passing mention between weather updates and a livestock auction schedule. Local authorities are asking for information regarding a missing individual last seen near the county road late Tuesday night. No name, no details. The soldier turned the radio off. He already knew who it was. That afternoon, the county road stayed empty. No slow passes, no idling engines, no unfamiliar sedans stopping short of the yard. The land felt released, like pressure letting go all at once. At the fence line, the second white post was gone, not broken, removed. The hole where it had been driven was filled in carefully, tamped flat, almost respectful. Whoever did it hadn't rushed. They'd taken time to erase their own claim. The soldier stood there a long moment, boots planted, eyes scanning the horizon. No cloth markers, no tape, no paint, just wire, land, and wind. In town, the disappearance gained shape without gaining clarity. The man hadn't been reported missing by family. No one came forward quickly. It was co-workers who raised the concern, men who noticed an empty seat in a truck, unanswered calls, a phone left on a kitchen table that never rang again. The sheriff asked questions, quiet ones. He spoke to the feed store clerk, to the gas station owner, to a man who lived near the scrubland where trucks sometimes parked late at night. No one had seen anything, which meant everyone had. The soldier saw the sheriff once more 2 days later. The cruiser stopped at the gate but didn't pull in. The sheriff leaned against the door, hat low, eyes tired. "You hear the news?" he asked. The soldier nodded. "They're expanding the search." "I figured." The sheriff studied the fence, the land beyond it. "Anyone been out here since?" "No." "Before?" The soldier didn't answer right away. The sheriff didn't push. "That land's been trouble longer than you've owned it," the sheriff said finally. "Men think quiet places mean no consequences." The soldier met his gaze. Quiet places remember everything. The sheriff held that look a second longer than necessary, then straightened. "If you notice anything unusual, I will." The cruiser left without dusting the road. That night, the soldier slept through the dark hours for the first time since he'd arrived. No engines, no wire sounds, no cattle stirring. The land had gone still. 3 days later, a truck was found. Abandoned. Not burned. Not stripped. Just left where the dirt road narrowed and the rocks forced a stop. The keys were still inside. The door wasn't locked. It hadn't been wrecked. It had been parked. Inside, they found nothing useful. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just a half-empty pack of discount cigarettes and a phone with no signal history past a certain point. The point where the land dipped. The story didn't make the papers beyond a small column. There was no spectacle. No suspects. No conclusions. Men like that didn't always leave evidence behind. Sometimes they just stopped leaving. On the ranch, life resumed its rhythm. The cattle returned to the near pasture. The gates stayed locked. The fence held. One morning the soldier found a single boot print near the creek bed. Not fresh, not deep. Just a reminder. He didn't follow it. He erased it. By the end of the week, the offer was withdrawn. No call. No visit. Just silence. The feed store clerk avoided his eyes the next time the soldier came in. Not out of fear, but respect. The kind men showed when they realized something they didn't want to understand. Others noticed too. Trucks that used to idle now passed straight through. Men who once lingered now nodded and moved on. The land was no longer discussed as an opportunity. It was referred to as a boundary. One evening, as the sun dropped low and cast long shadows across the wire, the soldier walked the fence one last time that day. Everything was intact. At the creek dip, he paused. The water was low, barely moving, rocks exposed, tracks washed clean by time and weather. He stood there listening. Nothing. No engines. No voices. No markers. Just wind. That was when he understood what had really happened. No one had been punished. No one had been threatened. The land had simply stopped being negotiable. Men who came to test it discovered there was nothing to gain, and something they couldn't name to lose. Back at the house, the soldier opened the notebook. He read the last entries once more. They want the land. They've decided I'm the obstacle. They think pressure will move me. He closed the notebook and slid it back into the cabinet. Pressure hadn't moved him. Time had done something else. It had made the wrong men impatient. And impatience, he had learned long ago, was what ended most conflicts before they ever turned loud. That night, standing on the porch, he watched the horizon darken and felt the ranch settle around him like it finally recognized who stood on it. The line was still there, unbroken, unspoken, and no one crossed it again. The ranch was quiet again. Not the kind of quiet that came from absence, but the kind that followed resolution. Wind moved through the grass without resistance. The cattle grazed in loose patterns, unbothered. Gates stayed closed because no one tried them anymore. Weeks passed. The county road returned to its old rhythm. Delivery trucks, a school bus in the mornings, the occasional rancher hauling feed. No one slowed near the fence. No one stopped to look. The soldier noticed the difference most at night. Before, the dark had felt alert, stretched thin. Now it settled naturally, like a body finally allowed to rest. He slept without listening for engines, without counting sounds, without waiting. One afternoon he found something near the creek bed. Not a marker, not a threat, just a small wooden stake, weathered and half-buried, likely driven decades earlier and forgotten. He pulled it free and examined it. No tape, no paint, no meaning attached anymore. He left it lying there. Some things didn't need to be marked to exist. In town, the story faded the way stories like that always did. New concerns replaced old ones. People stopped asking questions that had no answers. The land near the scrub was avoided, not officially, not deliberately, just instinctively. The feed store clerk eventually met the soldier's eyes again. "You settling in?" he asked. "I am," the soldier replied. The clerk nodded once. That was enough. The sheriff drove past once more, slower than usual, and raised 2 fingers from the steering wheel. No visit, no conversation. Acknowledgement. The ranch didn't change hands. It didn't get developed. No surveyors returned. No offers resurfaced. Whatever momentum had once surrounded the land dissolved quietly, like something realizing it had chosen the wrong direction. On a late afternoon near the end of summer, the soldier repaired a section of fence that had sagged from age, not interference. He tightened the wire, reset the post, and stepped back to check the line. Straight. Strong. Done. As the sun lowered, he sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and watched the light move across the pasture. The cattle shifted with it, following warmth the way they always had. He thought briefly about the men who had tested the land. Not with anger, not with satisfaction, just as facts. They had wanted something that didn't belong to them. They had assumed persistence would wear resistance down. They had mistaken silence for weakness. He had seen that mistake before, in other places, other times. The difference here was simple. There was no one to argue with, no system to appeal to, no audience, just land and a line. When darkness came, it did so gently. No engines followed it, no footsteps, no sounds out of place. The soldier stood, turned off the porch light, and went inside. Behind him, the ranch remained exactly as it should have been all along, unclaimed by anyone who didn't respect it, unchallenged, unmoved. The line still existed, not because it was guarded, not because it was threatened, but because once it had been crossed, everyone involved learned the same lesson. Some boundaries don't announce consequences. They simply endure, and those who fail to recognize them are remembered only by their absence.